Someone in your orbit didn't just envy what you had, they believed they deserved it more than you. With eyes full of entitlement and hearts warped by desperation, they watched your every step, convinced that if they could just take your position, everything would finally fall into place for them. They whispered behind closed doors, made secret calls, and aligned themselves with forces they didn't understand, all to sabotage a destiny they never had the clearance to access. And now, after their efforts have collapsed under their own weight, you stand untouched by the chaos they tried to engineer, rising into the very blessing they tried to intercept. Except now, it's coming to you with divine amplification. They misjudged everything. Thought what you carried could be stolen, bargained for, or manipulated into their hands. They assumed power was passed down through back channels, favors, and tricks, never realizing that yours was rooted in something eternal, unreachable, and unbreakable. So while they mapped out your destruction with precision, the source of your endurance remained invisible to their strategies. They launched plans in daylight but couldn't touch what was guarded in the unseen. And now, they're left swinging at silence while the storm they called down devours their own foundations. It didn't come from far away. The most dangerous disruption always sits where comfort lives. This wasn't some distant enemy or unfamiliar force. This was someone who smiled often, asked the right questions, and mirrored just enough of your spirit to slip past your natural defenses. They studied you not out of admiration, but with intent, noting every silence, every delay in your voice, every time your light dimmed for just a second. They saw your growth as a resource, not a miracle. But what they never expected was that your silence wasn't weakness, it was surveillance. And now, everything they built on your back is collapsing, and the one thing they feared most is happening. You're still rising, but this time with no ceiling. They didn't show up by accident. They appeared when your light started casting longer shadows. At first, it seemed like curiosity, even connection. But the timing was too precise, the compliments too calculated, the interest in your life too specific. Their behavior mimicked warmth, but their gaze held calculation. Every gesture, every shared moment was less about building trust and more about collecting pieces of a puzzle they were never meant to solve. They weren't admiring your path, they were measuring it, dissecting your rhythm, looking for entry points they could exploit. It spiraled the moment they understood what fueled you couldn't be touched with performance or persuasion. What you carried wasn't found in books, bought with money, or copied through mimicry. While they stitched their persona together from fragments of borrowed personas, you moved with a current they couldn't fake, an alignment they couldn't manufacture. Your presence disrupted their illusion, not because you tried, but because truth always unsettles what is built on imitation. Their grip on their own image began to slip the moment you entered their frame. When you stepped back, when you didn't extend the closeness they were betting on, everything cracked. Their carefully choreographed behavior faltered. The tone shifted. It wasn't sadness or confusion that surfaced, it was fury. The kind that comes from being denied access to something they believed they were entitled to. The refusal pierced through the mask, exposing the instability they'd been suppressing under a performance of charm. What looked like friendship was actually a trap, one that collapsed the second you chose to protect your peace. They started unraveling the moment they realized proximity wasn't enough. The hunger to possess what wasn't meant for them spiraled into something far more dangerous. Rejection didn't push them away, it ignited a more sinister pursuit. What once wore the face of forced closeness mutated into attempts to force entry. They weren't driven by ambition, they were haunted by scarcity. Behind their polished surface was a crumbling interior, stretched thin by invisible debts, mounting obligations, and a fear that everything they built would soon collapse without your presence as their shortcut. Their reality was nothing like the illusion they projected. Behind the scenes, they were entangled in agreements they couldn't uphold, faking progress while silently panicking. Debt had become their second skin. Their world was held together with unstable promises, and your rising trajectory was a reminder that their shortcuts weren't working. But what they didn't account for was the invisible hand that kept moving you forward, higher, and out of their grasp. even as they reached more desperately for pieces of your momentum. While they sank energy into manipulative tactics, you were being quietly escorted toward new alignments. You weren't just busy, you were being divinely concealed. Every distraction you called meaningful, every responsibility that pulled your attention away from their chaos, was a form of armor. Something bigger was shielding your focus. The timing of your deep engagement wasn't random. It was designed to keep you emotionally out of reach while protection worked behind the curtain. Even the people they pulled in to help sabotage you are turning into liabilities. What they assumed would be silent participants are now unpredictable risks. Promises of easy rewards fell flat when the plan demanded more than they bargained for. Rumors didn't spread as far. Manipulations backfired. Attempts to unsettle your foundation failed because the very environment they tried to destabilize became their own trap. Their desperation has become visible, not just to you, but to those they once controlled. And now, the story is slipping out of their hands. They underestimated the force that surrounds those chosen by something greater. Hired hands were sent in thinking they'd find vulnerability. Instead, they encountered a wall they couldn't decode. Every calculated disruption they attempted dissolved before it could make contact. Every narrative they tried to distort ended up unraveling in their own mouths. The chaos they crafted turned on its creator like a machine with faulty wiring. What they didn't realize was that your protection wasn't passive, it was intelligent. It watched them load their weapons, only to twist their aim back toward themselves. Behind the curtain, their structure is crumbling. Promises made in the heat of persuasion are now overdue, and the ones who signed on are realizing they've bought into a vision built entirely on exaggeration. Payments are missing, timelines shattered, and reputations once spoken with pride now come with hesitation. The illusion of power has thinned, and with it, so has the loyalty of those who once followed their lead. Now they're surrounded by expectations they can't fulfill. They're being pressed by people who don't care about apologies, only results. The alliances they forged were transactional, and the deals they made required capital they never had. They mortgaged a future they couldn't guarantee, all to project a confidence that was never rooted in reality. And now the costs are circling back with no mercy and no delay. What they tried to extract from you has become the very thing that's stripping them bare. In chasing after your elevation, they've forfeited what little structure they had left. Their network is thinning. Their foundation has cracked. They tried to take what was never offered, and in doing so, sabotaged themselves beyond repair. The very hunger that pushed them toward your orbit is now what's dragging them under, and there's no one left to shield them from the collapse. What's even more unexplainable is how their strategies have done nothing but spotlight your rise. Every attempt to undercut your trajectory became the reason your next door opened. What they meant to silence became an echo chamber that amplified your purpose. What they meant for containment has only made you more visible. This isn't about random fortune. This is what happens when destiny outruns interference, when interference becomes fuel for progress. And it keeps happening, over and over again. The silence on their side has grown heavier, not from reflection, but from panic. They're gasping for momentum while watching you expand with effortless grace. What once gave them confidence now feels like quicksand beneath their feet. The imbalance between where they are and where you're headed is no longer just visible, it's unbearable. Even those who once cheered for them are beginning to fall quiet, questioning not just their methods, but their entire sense of direction. The very tools they use to invade your space have become the spotlight that betrays them. What began as a covert effort to extract your rhythm and derail your focus has unraveled into a public unraveling of their own patterns. They thought they were gathering leverage. Instead, they left a breadcrumb trail for forces much greater than them to follow. The moments they thought were private have become loud echoes in unseen realms. The blueprints of their schemes now read like confessions written in plain view. Their tactics left fingerprints. Every transfer, every plan, every whisper of intent left a trace. Communications they believed were secure are now liabilities. Transactions meant to be hidden have surfaced in perfect sequence. Coordinated efforts to disturb your balance are now exposed for what they are. Not just betrayal, but evidence. The web they spun to entrap you has now become the same net tightening around them, and it's closing faster than they can untangle it. What they never saw coming was the mirror being held up to them, not by human hands, but by something much older, wiser, and beyond negotiation. This entire unfolding wasn't just about you, it was their reckoning. An unspoken invitation had been extended, to step out of envy and into alignment, to learn rather than compete, to build rather than siphon. But instead of asking questions, they forged weapons. Instead of choosing growth, they chose shortcuts. And now, the same door they tried to force open has locked behind them, not because of punishment, but because of choice. Some doors don't slam shut, they creak for a while, giving echoes of warning before they close forever. They were given glimpses. Moments that could have shifted their direction. Night visions that hinted at the price of betrayal. Subtle messages tucked inside conversations, outcomes, and delays. But instead of listening, they doubled down. The hunger to control your fate outweighed every cautionary signal. Arrogance turned their back on clarity. Longing for what wasn't theirs drowned out every whisper of wisdom. In that choice, their reflection was revealed. Not through words, but by action. While they could have taken the higher path, asked questions, sought growth, chosen alignment, they leaned into sabotage. But you took the opposite route. When tested, you stayed anchored. While others manipulated, you remained authentic. Your discernment didn't just protect you, it elevated you. And even when chaos brushed against your peace, you didn't abandon your values. You held steady when it would have been easier to retaliate. Through it all, something within you changed. Not broken, not wounded, reforged. Their hostility became the friction that shaped your sharpest edges. Every time they tried to pierce your purpose, you grew more precise. Every attempt to cloud your clarity only purified it. What they couldn't steal became the very thing that multiplied, because nothing they did could touch what was growing in your inner world. They were trying to damage you, but they were unknowingly participating in your refining. Now comes the shift. The reversal. The echo of every lost opportunity bouncing back as a breakthrough in your life. The very things they tried to keep out of your reach are arriving in forms they never anticipated. Faster, fuller, and beyond the scale they imagined. What was withheld from you is now being delivered in excess. Not to prove a point, but to fulfill a promise. Because the gates they tried to barricade were never theirs to guard, and now they open with force no human hand can resist. Something vast is on its way to you, and it's going to shake the air around you. The very outcomes they tried to reroute are now building momentum in your favor. What they attempted to intercept is being delivered with multiplied force. Partnerships are forming beyond their field of influence. Financial flow is breaking past former blockages, and opportunities are coming from directions they never thought you'd access. The life they wanted to counterfeit is becoming your reality, in a form they never had the capacity to hold. Their spotlight dims each time yours intensifies. Their hunger for attention has now made them transparent, and not in the way they hoped. They've depleted everything they relied on trying to mimic your path. Burned out favors, lost credibility, spent energy and time as if they had an endless supply. They tried to raise a structure on a stolen design, and now it's crumbling beneath their feet. And the weight they carry isn't external anymore. It's the inner collapse that hurts the most. Regret doesn't pay back what they traded away. They carry it in their posture now. Their silence speaks louder than any confrontation. Where once there was false confidence, now there's hesitation. They avoid your orbit not because they don't see you, but because standing in your light reveals what they tried to hide. They feel the loss before anything's said. The illusion they depended on no longer shields them. Their actions echo, even in rooms where your name is never mentioned. Those around you are noticing. The energy doesn't lie anymore. People who were once indifferent are beginning to take sides, drawn instinctively to clarity. The contrast is too visible. What they once tried to camouflage has become glaring. Their numbers are shrinking, their approval waning. Isolation is no longer your burden, it's theirs. And the very connections they thought they controlled are slipping away, one quiet goodbye at a time. The scaffolding they leaned on is folding in. Once strong alliances are fading, and those who stood beside them are stepping back, not out of betrayal, but revelation. They see what's been done. They recognize what was manipulated. And now, the very web meant to pull you down is tightening around their own access points. The roads they closed on you have now become dead ends for themselves. But this was never about revenge. The collapse of their narrative is not your trophy. This is about your freedom. The fog they tried to throw over your mind is lifting. The tension of trying to decipher their malice is dissolving. And the space they once occupied in your thoughts is now being cleared for peace, and for what's next. Because now, you rise without explanation. You win without apology. And you walk without needing to look back. There's been a shift in the atmosphere around you, not by accident, but by design. The fog surrounding your path is lifting, not to expose you, but to sharpen your vision. What once felt like confusion is revealing itself as a training ground. Patterns are becoming visible. Shadows are showing their outlines. You're not paranoid, you've just started seeing with spiritual accuracy. And what was once hidden is now undeniable. This hasn't been random. It's been warfare. And you've been rising through it. Every hit you took became a spark that lit your inner fire. Every manipulation you endured carved clarity into your perception. You no longer hesitate to honor your instincts. You no longer second-guess the shift in someone's tone, or the way their presence disrupts your peace. You've stopped offering space to those who prove they can't hold it with care. What used to confuse you now confirms everything you sensed from the beginning, and this time, you're not overlooking the signs. You've detached from needing validation to move forward. You're no longer asking for agreement to pursue what you've been called to build. The flow in your life is no longer tied to anyone else's permission. The source behind your favor isn't something they can manipulate, delay, or dilute. And now that you've stopped seeking access, your authority is becoming untouchable. Not louder, just purer. The flood that was once held back by unseen hands is now pouring through with speed and precision. Their sabotage didn't succeed, it scattered in your favor. The openings they tried to seal have become entry points for new levels of influence. You're being called into spaces you didn't apply for, conversations you weren't invited to, yet still, you're the center. And this wave is only just beginning. The bitter truth for them is this: they're being forced to witness what they couldn't block. The harvest they tried to intercept is now overflowing in front of their eyes. They didn't just lose access, they lost credibility. Their punishment isn't thunder, it's silence. Watching the very outcome they hope to destroy unfold without their fingerprints on it. There's a precision to the reversal that's unfolding now. Each thing they tried to take from you is being removed from their own life, not randomly, but as if each part knows exactly where it came from and where it's returning. Their craving for your life has left them empty-handed. They reached for your light, and now they sit in the dark. Not because they weren't given a chance, but because they refused to honor the process. The schemes they built required more fuel than they were willing to admit. They drained themselves funding false images, funneling energy into efforts that returned nothing but exposure. Now, the resources are gone, and so is the audience. The debts left behind aren't just financial, they're spiritual, emotional, and social. And no quick fix can buy back what's been lost. But what's been most devastating for them isn't the money. It's the unraveling of identity. The image they tried so hard to maintain is now met with whispers and side glances. The respect they once carried has faded into hesitation. They're no longer known for what they built, they're remembered for what they tried to destroy. And that's a legacy they never meant to write. Their public image has decayed faster than they can patch it. Once welcomed in high places and trusted with sensitive conversations, they now walk into rooms shadowed by suspicion. Former collaborators no longer return their calls. Events that once eagerly awaited their presence now proceed without even a mention of their name. The identity they constructed over years has unraveled in record time, all because they allowed bitterness to override strategy and vendetta to override vision. The social trust they once banked on has evaporated, not because of rumors, but because of truth too loud to ignore. And while they've been unraveling, you've been ascending. Not with noise, not with revenge, but with undeniable results. The things they tried to keep from your hands are arriving in waves. Where they hoped to create separation, unity formed. Where they intended loss, multiplication unfolded. Their attempts to cut you off only expanded your reach, and now the magnitude of your blessing is becoming a public spectacle that overshadows every scheme ever whispered behind closed doors. Their efforts didn't just fail, they boomeranged. Everything they sent out with malicious intent has found its way back, intensified. That inheritance they tried to intercept? It's not just arriving, it's accelerating. Financial avenues they never knew you had are blossoming. Quiet investments are producing loud returns. And the ground they thought they'd gain by draining you is now collapsing beneath them. Every silent prayer you released while they plotted has now become your defense and their undoing. This isn't a matter of luck or timing. It's proof that sacred things can't be tampered with. What's been assigned to you is sealed. Every attempt they made to divert your path has only proven how untouchable it truly is. They reached for what didn't belong to them, and now they're holding nothing. Every strategy meant to replace you has left them more invisible than ever. The fallout has reached their home now. The impact isn't just professional or financial, it's deeply personal. The people closest to them are watching everything unfold in disbelief. Where admiration once lived, discomfort has settled. Where trust once stood, doubt now lingers. They've become an example of how quickly a person can unravel when envy becomes the engine behind their choices. And those they enlisted to do the dirty work? They're no longer loyal. They've seen the inside of the operation, and now they're turning it inside out. Not out of righteousness, but out of self-preservation. They're sharing recordings, screenshots, transcripts. Details that even you weren't aware of are being exposed by the very mouths that once swore secrecy. Their control over the narrative is gone, replaced by a stream of disclosures that only accelerate their collapse. Some battles don't begin with swords. They start in silence, in jealousy dressed as curiosity, in intentions masked as concern. When they made you their target, they weren't just opposing a person, they were positioning themselves against something sacred. Their fixation activated a chain of responses far beyond their comprehension. The protection around your life isn't made of walls but of intelligence. Forces that calculate movements across realms they don't even believe exist. And once they crossed that invisible threshold, their name was recorded, not by men, but by beings who don't miss.